One afternoon, a doctor named Joey was getting ready to go whitewater rafting on the Kootenai River. She was heading out with her older brother Gray and three of their friends. There was Carissa, there was Van, and there was Trevor, a man who happened to be a former convict still out on parole. Joey already knew Trevor from before, and she was a little thrown to learn that he would be joining them on the water that day. Gray and Trevor both worked as guides at the rafting outfit, so they knew this river well. And because the Kootenai stretches for miles all the way up toward Canada, they packed plenty of gear and planned to camp along the way. Once everything was loaded, the group finally set off. While the current was calm, they drifted along and chatted about anything and everything. But the moment they hit a rougher stretch of rapids, the raft started bucking, and Joey was thrown right out into the water. Their trip had only just begun. This is River Wild. When they pulled over to rest along the bank, Gray went for a swim with Carissa and Van, while Trevor stayed behind to keep Joey company. After that, they pitched their tents and settled into camp for the night. But right from the start, Joey never seemed all that excited to be there, even though everyone around her was being warm and friendly. That night, they sat around the campfire, talking and drinking, until Joey excused herself to turn in early. Van, who had been holding it for a while, finally wandered off alone into the trees to relieve herself. Not long after, Trevor got up to do the same. And then out of nowhere, everyone heard Trevor shouting for help.
Ray! Guys, we need help here!
It turned out that Van had fractured the back of her skull after her head slammed against a rock. While Gray went off to find a large branch to prop up her head, and Trevor went searching for the first aid kit and the satellite phone, Van managed to tell Joey and Carissa something chilling. She said it was Trevor who had pushed her into that rock. Moments later, Trevor came back carrying the first aid kit, and he told them the satellite phone was broken. Reaching for help on a cell phone was out of the question too, because there was no signal anywhere out here. Gray explained that the nearest place to get help was Ranger Station 6, and on foot that was roughly a 12-hour hike. By river, though, it was only about 2 hours. The terrifying part, at least according to Joey, was that Van needed to reach a doctor in under 2 hours. Her fracture was severe, and the swelling could set in fast, which meant the whole group had no choice but to launch right away and run the river in the dead of night. Luckily, since Gray and Trevor guided this water for a living, they knew the route by heart. But partway down, Van started seizing. On top of that, they were being forced through some genuinely dangerous terrain. The raft flipped, and every one of them got swept into the current. Somehow they all survived, including Van, who Gray managed to haul back to shore. Trevor, meanwhile, was able to drag the raft in behind them. That was when Joey pulled Gray aside for a private word. She told him Trevor seemed to be deliberately trying to put them all in danger, because earlier, when Gray had called out for him to paddle left, Trevor had suddenly acted confused, and that was exactly what sent the raft over. She also passed along Van's confession, the part about Trevor being the one who pushed her. After that, they pressed on toward Ranger Station 6. When it finally came into view, they beached the raft, and Gray and Trevor took off running for the station, planning to use the phone there to call for a medical team that could arrive in maybe 15 minutes. But as they ran, Trevor stopped Gray in his tracks. He said he was worried Joey was going to pin something terrible on him, especially given that he was an ex-convict. He begged Gray to have his back if things went sideways. He reminded Gray that they had worked together for 3 years, that he trusted him, and he swore up and down that he had never laid a hand on Van. When they reached Ranger Station 6, they found the man on duty there, Walt. Gray asked him to arrange a helicopter right away to get Van out. But strangely, just as Walt reached for the satellite phone, Trevor stopped him. He argued that Van would be better off just riding to the hospital in Walt's truck, since it would be faster. Walt wasn't having it. He was going to make the call and let the hospital decide how she should be transported. The argument boiled over, and Trevor shoved Walt, who immediately drew a pistol on him.
Know that! Just give me the goddamn radio! Whoa! All right, guys.
The two of them grappled, and in a panic, Trevor pulled out his knife and drove it into Walt's stomach, killing him.
It's okay. No, come on! Stop! Come on, guys! Stop! Trevor, get down! Let go! Oh, God, guys! Come on, no!
With everything spiraling out of control, Trevor grabbed Walt's pistol and for a moment looked ready to do the unthinkable. But he stopped himself. Instead, he smashed the satellite phone, and then, at gunpoint, he forced Gray to load Walt's body into the truck. The truck was set on fire and rolled off a cliff where it exploded, erasing any trace of what had happened. After that, Trevor and Gray went back down to the river, and Trevor announced that they would keep heading north, all the way across the border into Canada, so he could get away from the police. And Gray was in it now too, tangled up in all of it, and he was sure no one would be guarding the crossing. The second Joey saw Trevor holding that pistol, she understood the truth. The three of them were now his prisoners. With no other option, they continued north. And tragically, Van finally slipped away, her skull fracture growing worse until it took her life. Somewhere along the way, a man happened to be crossing a bridge overhead. Let's just call him Biden. Joey, who was carrying a small fire striker, quietly angled it to catch the sunlight and flash it up toward him, hoping he would notice them. When Biden spotted Van lying in the raft, he immediately offered to help and suggested they make for a campground nearby. But Trevor brushed him off, claiming Van had only a minor injury and that Joey, being a doctor, had already treated her. Once Biden was gone, though, Trevor started to panic, terrified that the man would go straight to the police after seeing Van's lifeless body. He wanted to pull over and hunt Biden down. Gray talked him out of it, insisting they keep moving down the river to avoid making even more trouble. After all, even if Biden did call the police, they would be long past that bridge and impossible to find. After paddling for a good while, Gray asked everyone to stop and rest and to bury Van's body somewhere close by. That night, the four of them slept out in the middle of the forest. Trevor bound the hands and feet of Joey, Gray, and Carissa so none of them could slip away. Once he had fallen asleep, Joey quietly talked with her brother, and they finally opened up about something from the past, something that had left Joey deeply scarred. As it turned out, Gray and Trevor had been friends for a very long time, and when Joey was 15, Trevor had developed feelings for her. Gray had assumed the feeling was mutual, that his little sister liked Trevor back. So one summer, he rented a cabin and deliberately left Joey and Trevor alone together there, hoping the two of them would grow closer. But Joey had never felt anything for Trevor at all. And that summer, without any warning, Trevor assaulted her. That was the reason she had been so reluctant to come rafting from the very beginning. She was still carrying the trauma of what Trevor had done to her back then, and the pain of knowing that her own brother had failed to protect her. There was also a good chance that Trevor had hurt Van on purpose, so he could steer the raft across the border into Canada and slip out from under police watch while he was still on parole. Which brought them to a grim conclusion. Trevor had the makings of a psychopath. On top of being volatile and willing to kill, he would do absolutely anything to get what he wanted. After all this came out, Joey pleaded with Gray to do something so they could escape. But Gray was afraid. Trevor had the pistol, and the moment any of them tried anything, all three of them could be shot on the spot. Meanwhile, Biden, who had genuinely been suspicious after seeing Van laid out in that raft, had been following them the whole time. Now he was creeping closer, determined to rescue Joey and the others. He had also noticed that earlier in the day, Trevor was the only one who answered him, while everyone else looked tense and uneasy. At first, Biden thought about grabbing the pistol Trevor was holding, but that turned out to be too risky, so instead he went straight for the ropes, freeing Joey, Gray, and Carissa. And then, all at once, Trevor woke up and caught him in the act. He shot Biden dead where he stood. As they quietly buried Biden, Carissa slipped a folding knife out of his pocket. After that, they set off again down the river, heading north. Gray pushed Trevor to release Joey and Carissa into the forest, arguing that they were about to reach a waterfall that would be far too dangerous to run with four people weighing down the raft. Trevor eventually agreed, figuring it was better than all of them drowning and getting swept away. In the meantime, Carissa was working to cut the rope around her wrists, but it was slow going, so she got desperate and used the knife to puncture the rubber raft instead. Little by little, it started to deflate. Before long, Trevor noticed the hiss of air leaking from the hole and accused Carissa of doing it. Of course, she denied it. Trevor demanded they pull ashore right away so the leak could be patched, but Gray suddenly attacked him with a can of bug spray, and the two of them locked into a brutal fight, while Joey and Carissa struggled with everything they had to free themselves. Then came the worst of it. Gray was shot in the stomach. Joey and Carissa, who had finally gotten loose, bolted from the scene. Joey told Carissa to keep running until she found help, while she herself would double back to check on Gray. Joey kept dodging Trevor as he fired shot after shot at her, until she leapt into the river and found Gray, still barely clinging to life. She rushed to drag Gray into the raft and got them both out of there. Behind them, Trevor, now out of bullets, reloaded and set off after her. Fortunately, the raft already had a good head start. Joey urged Gray to keep pressure on his wound. In a horrifying moment, while giving chase, Trevor gunned down two men who happened to be passing nearby and stole their canoe. He came after Joey and Gray, firing at them the whole way. But mercifully, his ammunition finally ran dry. The tension only tightened, because they were now closing in on the waterfall. Gray kept guiding Joey, telling her which way to paddle so they could reach the bank in time. But in the end, the raft flipped, and the two of them were pulled into the current. Joey and Trevor were both dragged along by the raging water, right toward the edge of the falls. But somehow, Joey managed to grab hold of Gray and pull them both back onto solid ground. Even so, the moment they made it to shore, Trevor was already waiting. He plunged a knife into Joey's back and tried to finish her off, until Gray gave everything he had to save his sister, hurling himself into Trevor and taking the man over the edge with him. Both of them fell to their deaths. By then, Joey's lungs were filling with blood. So she cut open her own chest with a knife to let it drain, then jammed the barrel of a pen into the opening to act as a makeshift airway, just so she could breathe again. On the other side of all this, Carissa had actually made it to help. She was out searching for Joey now, riding along with a search and rescue team in a helicopter. After circling the area for a while, they finally spotted her below, and Joey was pulled to safety at last. So the moral of the story is, if your rafting guide says, "Trust me," but his resume includes prison, maybe choose the lazy river instead.